Lucille Ball walked onto the Tonight Show stage on February 14, 1989, and America laughed. They always laughed when Lucy appeared. For 40 years, she had been the queen of comedy, the woman who taught America how to be funny, the redhead who had turned a television sitcom into a cultural revolution. But Johnny Carson wasn't laughing. He had known Lucy for 35 years. They had shared stages, shared jokes, shared the kind of late-night phone calls that only happen between two people who understand the loneliness of being permanently in character. And tonight, when Lucy emerged from behind that curtain, Johnny saw something that made his heart stop. She was dying. Not metaphorically, not dramatically, actually dying. The cancer that had been eating away at her body for months was hidden beneath layers of makeup and costume and pure, stubborn willpower. Nobody in that audience knew. Nobody watching at home suspected. But Johnny knew. He had visited her in the hospital 3 weeks ago. He had held her hand while she cried. He had promised to make her last Tonight Show appearance something she could be proud of. Lucy settled into the guest chair with the grace of a woman who had spent 6 decades learning how to move on camera. Her timing was still impeccable. Her smile was still radiant. But up close, Johnny could see the effort it took. The slight tremor in her hands, the way she breathed a little too carefully, the shadows under her eyes that no amount of foundation could fully hide. "Lucy, you look absolutely beautiful tonight," Johnny said, and he meant it. "Johnny, darling, I've always looked beautiful. It just took the rest of the world a while to catch up." The audience roared. Classic Lucy, quick, sharp, self-deprecating in a way that was actually deeply confident. For the first segment, everything felt normal. Lucy told stories about the old days of television. She talked about Desi, about the early struggles, about the time she accidentally set her head on fire during a sketch and kept performing anyway. The audience ate it up. This was what they had come for. This was the Lucy they loved. But during the commercial break, something changed. Lucy reached across and grabbed Johnny's hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong, desperate almost. "Johnny, I need to tell you something before we go back on." "Lucy, we only have 90 seconds. That's enough. I just need you to know why I came tonight. Why I had to come tonight even though the doctors told me I was crazy." Johnny leaned in closer, blocking her face from the cameras that were still rolling for behind-the-scenes footage. "Tell me. I've been lying my whole life, Johnny. To everyone. To the audience. To my children. To myself. And I don't want to die with the lie still inside me." The stage manager held up his hand. 30 seconds to air. "Lucy, what are you talking about?" She pressed a small folded piece of paper into his palm. "Read this, after the show, and then you'll understand everything." The cameras came back on. Lucy's face transformed instantly. The pain disappeared. The exhaustion vanished. In its place was Lucy Ricardo, the eternal clown, the woman who could make a room full of strangers feel like they were part of her family. Johnny slipped the note into his pocket and tried to focus on the interview. But his mind kept returning to her words. "I've been lying my whole life." "So, Lucy," Johnny said, steering back to safer territory, "you've done everything in this business. Movies, television, Broadway. Is there anything you never got to do?" Lucy paused. For just a moment, the mask slipped. "Yes, there's one thing." "What's that?" "I never got to be myself." The audience laughed, assuming it was a setup for a joke. But Johnny saw her eyes. They weren't laughing. "What do you mean by that?" Lucy looked at the audience, then at the camera, then back at Johnny. She was making a decision in real time. He could see it happening. "Can I tell you a story, Johnny? A story I've never told anyone?" "Of course." Lucy took a breath. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer, more vulnerable. The voice of Lucille Ball, not Lucy Ricardo. "When I was 7 years old, my father died, just like that. One day he was there, the next day he was gone. And my mother, she couldn't handle it. She sent me to live with my grandparents, and for years I felt like I had been thrown away, like I wasn't wanted." The audience was completely silent. This wasn't the Lucy they knew. This was someone else entirely. I learned very early that if I made people laugh, they would keep me around. Laughter was my currency, my protection, my way of making sure nobody would ever throw me away again. Johnny nodded slowly, understanding beginning to dawn. So every joke, every pratfall, every silly face I've ever made, it all started from the same place. Fear, terror, really. The absolute certainty that if I ever stopped being funny, if I ever let people see who I really was underneath all the comedy, they would abandon me, just like my mother did. A woman in the third row was crying openly. I married Desi because he made me laugh, and because I thought if I was with someone that talented, some of it would rub off on me. I would finally be enough. But you know what? I never felt enough. Not when we created I Love Lucy. Not when we became the most watched show in television history. Not when I became the first woman to run a major television studio. She shook her head slowly. None of it filled the hole, because the hole wasn't about success. It was about worth, and you can't earn worth. You either believe you have it or you don't. Johnny reached across and took her hand. The cameras captured every moment. Lucy, why are you telling me this now? Lucy looked at him with eyes that were wet but clear. Because I'm running out of time, Johnny. And I realized something recently. Something that I wish I had understood 60 years ago. What's that? The people who loved me really loved me. They didn't love me because I was funny. They loved me despite it. They loved Lucille, not Lucy. And I spent my whole life hiding Lucille away because I was convinced she wasn't good enough. Her voice broke. My children don't know me, Johnny. Not really. They know the performer. They know the businesswoman. They know the legend. But they don't know the scared little girl from Jamestown, New York, who just wanted her mother to come back. The audience was weeping now. Not just a few people. Almost everyone. I've spent the past few months trying to fix that. Trying to have real conversations with my kids. Trying to tell them who I really am, not who I play on television. And you know what I discovered? What? It's terrifying. Being real is the most terrifying thing I've ever done. And I've set myself on fire, fallen off buildings, and worked with some of the most difficult directors in Hollywood history. The audience laughed through their tears. But it's also the most rewarding. Last week, my daughter Lucy looked at me and said, Mom, I feel like I'm meeting you for the first time. And I cried, because she was right. She was meeting me for the first time. The real me. The one I had been hiding for 77 years. Johnny squeezed her hand. Lucy, what you're doing right now, being this honest, this vulnerable, this is braver than anything you've ever done on screen. You know what's funny, Johnny? And I mean actually funny, not comedy funny. I spent my whole career making people laugh. Millions of people. Billions of laughs. And I always thought that was my legacy. That when I died, people would remember the jokes. She paused. But now I realize that's not what matters. The jokes will fade. The reruns will stop eventually. The world will move on. What matters is the moments when we actually connect with each other, when we drop the act and let ourselves be seen. She looked directly into the camera. If you're watching this at home, and you've been hiding behind something, a character, a role, a version of yourself that you think people want, I need you to hear something. It's not worth it. The safety you think you're getting by hiding, it's an illusion. All you're really doing is making yourself more alone. Her voice was strong now, passionate. Take it from someone who spent 77 years perfecting the art of hiding. It doesn't work. Sooner or later, you run out of time to be real. And when you're lying in a hospital bed, looking back at your life, you don't wish you had been funnier. You wish you had been more honest. You wish you had let people in. You wish you had been brave enough to be yourself. The audience erupted in applause. Not the polite applause of entertainment. Something deeper. Something that felt like collective healing. Johnny stood and walked around his desk. He sat on the edge of Lucy's chair and put his arm around her. The cameras scrambled to adjust. Lucy, I have to tell you something. What's that, Johnny? In 30 years behind this desk, I've interviewed thousands of people. Presidents, movie stars, athletes, legends. But what you just did, being that honest about your own struggle, that's the bravest thing I've ever seen on this stage." Lucy smiled, and for the first time that night, it wasn't a performance. "You know what, Johnny? I think this is the first time in my entire career that I've actually been present for an interview. Usually I'm thinking 3 jokes ahead, planning my exits, making sure I'm giving the audience what they want, but right now, I'm just here. Just me. It's strange. How does it feel? Terrifying. And wonderful. And sad because I waited so long to do it. It's never too late, Lucy." Her smile faltered slightly. "Maybe not, but it's later than you think." Johnny understood what she meant. The cancer, the timeline, the borrowed time she was running on. "Then let's make this moment count," he said. For the next 20 minutes, Lucy and Johnny had the most honest conversation of their 35-year friendship. She talked about the failure of her second marriage to Gary Morton, whom she loved but never fully let in. She talked about the guilt she felt for working so much when her children were young. She talked about the loneliness of fame, the isolation of being a legend, the prison of always having to be on. She talked about Desi. "I never stopped loving him," she admitted. "Even after the divorce, even after he remarried, even after all the pain we caused each other. He was the love of my life, and I drove him away because I was too scared to let him see the real me." Did he know that? He died not knowing. That's my biggest regret, that I never told him the truth. I let him go to his grave thinking that I didn't love him enough, when the truth was I loved him so much it terrified me. She wiped her eyes carefully, mindful of the makeup. "Don't make my mistake, Johnny. If you love someone, tell them. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait until you've figured out how to say it perfectly. Just say it, imperfectly, messily, honestly, because one day you'll run out of chances." Johnny nodded slowly. He was thinking about his own relationships, his 3 ex-wives, his children, all the words left unsaid. "I have something I need to tell you too, Lucy." "What's that?" 35 years ago, when I first started hosting this show, I was terrified. I didn't think I was funny enough, quick enough, talented enough. I used to throw up before every taping for the first year. Lucy's eyes widened. "I never knew that." "Nobody did. I hid it. Just like you hid your fears. But there was one night, about 6 months in, when I was seriously considering quitting. I had bombed a monologue. The ratings were slipping. NBC was making noise about replacing me. I thought my career was over." "What happened?" "You called me. Do you remember? It was probably 2 in the morning. You were shooting something in New York and you couldn't sleep. We talked for 3 hours about comedy, about fear, about the loneliness of being the person everyone looks to for laughter." Lucy's eyes were glistening. "And at the end of that conversation, you said something that changed my life. You said, 'Johnny, the secret isn't being fearless. It's being afraid and doing it anyway. Every great comic is terrified. We just learn to dance with the terror instead of running from it.'" He took both her hands in his. "I stayed because of you, Lucy. I've had 30 years behind this desk because of a phone call at 2 in the morning, and I never properly thanked you for that." Lucy was crying now, not trying to hide it, not worried about the cameras. "You're thanking me now," she whispered. "That's enough. That's more than enough." The show went to its final commercial. When they came back, Johnny made an announcement that surprised the producers. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to do something unusual. Instead of ending the show the normal way, I'd like to give Lucy the last word. Lucy, is there anything else you'd like to say?" Lucy looked at the audience, then at the camera, then back at Johnny. "Just one thing." She stood up from her chair. It took effort, more effort than the audience could see, but she stood. She faced the camera directly. "I've spent 77 years making people laugh. It was my joy and my prison, my gift and my curse. But standing here tonight, I realize something I wish I had understood long ago." She took a breath. "Laughter is wonderful. It heals. It connects. It makes the unbearable bearable. But it's not enough. Not on its own. What we really need, What I really needed, and never admitted, is to be known, truly known. Not as a character, not as a performer, not as a legend, just as a person, flawed, scared, imperfect, human. Tears streamed down her face. If I could live my life over, I wouldn't change the comedy. But I would change the hiding. I would let people in sooner. I would tell Desi I loved him every single day. I would hold my children more and work less. I would be braver about being vulnerable and less worried about being funny. She smiled through her tears. But I can't live it over. None of us can. We can only change what we do from this moment forward. So that's my message, I guess. Whatever you're hiding, stop. Whoever you love, tell them. Whatever you're afraid to say it. Because tomorrow isn't promised. And the only thing worse than dying is dying with the truth still locked inside you. She blew a kiss to the audience. Thank you for 40 years of laughter. Thank you for letting me into your homes. Thank you for loving Lucy, even when I couldn't love myself. The audience rose as one, standing ovation, tears and applause mixing together in a sound that was half celebration, half grief. They knew somehow that this was goodbye, not just to the show, to her. 13 days later, Lucille Ball underwent heart surgery. She never recovered. She died on April 26, 1989. She was 77 years old. Johnny Carson was in his dressing room when he heard the news. He sat in silence for a long time, holding the note she had pressed into his palm on that last night together. He had read it 100 times since then. Each time, it broke his heart a little more. The note read, "Dear Johnny, if you're reading this, I finally told the truth. Thank you for giving me the space to do it. I spent my whole life making people laugh because I was afraid they wouldn't love me otherwise. But you taught me something important. You loved Lucy, yes. But you also loved Lucille, the scared girl, the imperfect woman, the human being behind the legend. That meant more to me than every laugh I ever got. Don't make the same mistake I did. Don't wait until the end to be real. You have so much life left. Use it honestly. Tell the people you love that you love them. Drop the mask even when it's scary. Let people see the real Johnny, not just Carson. I believe in you. I always have. With all my love, Lucille. P.S. The jokes don't matter. The connection does. Remember that. Johnny kept that note in his desk drawer until his final show in 1992. On his last night behind the Tonight Show desk, he almost read it on air. He had it in his hand, ready to share Lucy's final words with the world. But in the end, he decided to keep it private. Some things are too sacred to share. Some messages are meant only for the person who received them. He did, however, take Lucy's advice. In his final years, away from the spotlight, Johnny became more open with his family, more vulnerable with his friends, more willing to be Johnny instead of Carson. When he died in 2005, they found Lucy's note among his most treasured possessions. His family donated it to the Television Academy, where it remains today, a testament to a friendship that transcended fame, a conversation that transcended entertainment, and a truth that both of them spent their lives learning. The laughs fade. The fame fades. The only thing that remains is the love we give and receive while we're here. And that's no joke. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button. Share it with someone who might be hiding behind their own mask. Drop a comment about a time when you finally let yourself be real with someone. And remember what Lucille Ball learned in her final days. The laughs don't matter nearly as much as the connection. Being known is better than being applauded, and it's never too late to tell the truth, until it is. So don't wait.